Senate Republican Leader Rob Ward. I'm joined by several of my colleagues, including Senator Helming, our conference chair, Senator Dan Steck from the North Country, Senator Mario Matera, as well as Senator Steve Rhodes, I saw. Who else is that right now? So I know Senator Canzoneri Fitzpatrick was planning on being here. We're also joined by Ken Pakulski he's Vice President of the New York State Business Council. I know we've had a lot of conversations with members of the Business Council, small businesses, on the topic that we're here to discuss, which is EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, colloquially known as the EPR bill. This bill passed the Senate last year, and we are hearing that the Democrats have every intention of passing it again in the Senate. This is a bill that would ban all kinds of packaging that will undoubtedly, and don't take my word for it, it's been put out there by Business Council, by other trade associations, grocery stores, certainly packaging companies, but this will drive up the cost of food prices, namely. Grocery bills will increase for every family if this bill would be passed by both houses and signed into law by the governor. Specifically, and this might be unfair, but this would have like all things like this, would have a real negative impact on poor communities and working class families of all backgrounds. So not surprisingly, it didn't pass in the Assembly, and I say not surprisingly because, why? Because a lot of Senate members who represent minority districts, African-American populations, first-generation American low-income districts, guess what they know? They know this is going to drive up costs for their constituents in the city of New York and across New York State. And that's why it didn't pass. Now, unfortunately, it's being carried by a senator from one of the wealthiest parts of our state in Westchester County. And I just always, I don't want to play like the class game, but I just hate how this always seems to be the case, that people who represent some of the wealthiest zip codes in America, in Manhattan, Upper East Side, other parts of the state, they're the ones who are always saying, we have to do this. This is the right thing to do. Well, maybe easy for them to say, because maybe their constituents won't notice the increase in their bills. But I can tell you, most of our conference, their constituents, absolutely will. And these are the kinds of things that not only drive up costs for consumers, and this will, but it drives out jobs. This will drive out more jobs. So the Democrats talk a lot, as we all do, about affordability. That's a word you hear a lot, affordability. We have to make New York more affordable. They say it and we say it. We agree with them. New York is unaffordable, and we got to make it more affordable. Where we disagree, that's the end of the agreement portion of the program, unfortunately, because after that, everything they want to do would only drive up costs. That's all we talk. EPR is a cost driver. This will increase people's costs at the grocery store. It'll make certain products won't even be available. I sat here with a gentleman. He came into the room here and had cheese. Now, they can keep cheese on a shelf in a grocery store for an X amount of period of time. Not because the cheese lasts that long, because the packaging allows it to last that long, which means, and by the way, that also means that someone purchases it, keep it in their fridge or whatever X amount of time. With the ban on some of these packaging and the limits on these packaging requirements, you're not going to have that. Grocery stores will not carry certain items, or if they do, they will be infinitely more expensive, because as their costs are going to go up, your costs are going to go up. That's how things work, folks. It's not evil capitalism. Costs get passed on to consumers. They're not saving you anything. They're chasing more jobs out of here. I have an employer in my district, Novolex, employs about 400 to 500 people in Orleans County, up near Holly, New York. Now, they're a global company. They have a huge presence in North America, Canada, the United States. This is their only facility in New York. I can promise you that should this get passed, I mean, their business, they're a packaging company. They make packaging. Are they going to continue to invest in a plant in a state that almost seems to be targeting their business? Probably not. That's 400 jobs in a county that desperately needs them. Desperately needs them. I would argue most places desperately could use 400 or 500 jobs. But I can tell you Orleans County in Western New York certainly does. We fought against this bill last year. Senator Helming gave a great, and I mean great, she always is great, but she did a great job on the floor articulating how this is going to impact. Yes, it's going to impact packagers. Yes, it's going to impact businesses, and you'll hear about that from Ken. But Senator Helming broke it down all the way. It's going to impact working families here in New York who are already struggling to make ends meet here in New York. And they care about the environment too, folks. But it always seems to be on their backs, the backs of jobs, the backs of hardworking people who are struggling to make ends meet in one of the highest cost states in the country, that we're going to try to pass what I would also argue is an unworkable plan. No one has been able to do this anywhere in the country. And I highly doubt that New York will be the first. If you look at our track record of doing things that no one else has done, it's not very good. So again, our conference stood against this bill last year. EPR, most people watching at home, you hear EPR, you know what that means. Extended producer responsibility. What it means is it's going to increase your grocery bill. And New York State Senate Democrats, like Pete Harckham and others, are the ones pushing it. People like Senator Rachel May, they are pushing this bill and driving up your costs, and they're going to tell you out of the same mouth that they care about affordability. These two things cannot be true. They either don't know what affordability really is, or they don't care. But it can't be both. So with that, I want to call up someone who knows about this issue, certainly from a business standpoint. He represents a lot of businesses, both large, medium-sized, even smaller businesses across New York State. From the Business Council of New York State, Vice President Ken Pakulski. Ken?
Thanks, Senator. Thanks for having me, and good afternoon, everyone. So I've been doing environmental policy work in New York State for more than 30 years now, and been working on packaging EPR legislation for like the past 5 sessions. And we have watched very closely what other states have done. And so right now, 7 other states have passed broad-based packaging EPR, expanded producer responsibility. And I think it's, from my point of view, every state has done it a little better. They've learned from what the earlier states did, and I'll tell you, they focused increasingly on the practical aspects of this. How do we get a program that's affordable, that focuses on improving recycling as the goal of this, and avoiding significant cost or disruption in product supplies to consumers? The Harckham-Glick bill, Senate 1464 that we're talking about today, goes in the absolute opposite direction. Very different than legislation most recently enacted by Minnesota, Maryland, and the state of Washington. We see this bill as having overly aggressive, we think unachievable packaging reduction goals. It has some direct bans of materials used in common packaging, particularly flexible packaging. It also has what I call a backdoor ban on products that says within 2 years, every type of packaging sold in the state has to have a reliable market for it to go back into recycled materials. I mean, the whole reason we're doing this is because we have to build up our recycling markets. And to think that everything on your shelf is going to have that market developed in just 2 years is pretty unrealistic, and other issues. So we, as the Business Council, now have commissioned 2 cost studies by Professor Calvin Locken at York University in Toronto, who's been studying the California provinces' evolution from recycling to EPR bills for the last 10 to 15 years, and is taking data from provinces has done that and extrapolate that for New York State, and shows that this will have a significant impact on consumers. Estimates ranging from $300 to $600 per household per year. Earlier this year, state of California, who had passed a bill, like midway between the states that have done this, so they learned some from the prior states, haven't learned enough. Their own state regulatory cost impact statement said their bill, which is not as aggressive, does not go as far as the Harckham-Glick bill, had a $10 billion implementation price tag over, $35 billion over 10 years, and they said this is unaffordable. And Governor Newsom sent it back to the drawing board and to rewrite those rules. So we're seeing states, struggling. you know, the concept is good. Let's divert material from disposal back into markets to be reused. We support that. We're part of a loose coalition of over 100 entities, businesses and trade associations that support workable, affordable, effective EPR legislation. This bill isn't it. We think the research done by private parties like us and by states who are looking at what their own laws will require are showing that, you know, a Harcum Glick style bill is simply not workable for New York. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I'm going to pass it to Senator Steck.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As the ranking member of the Environmental Conservation Committee, I've seen this bill come through committee several years now. I'm almost tired of talking about it. But as the leader pointed out, it's getting closer to reality. It had a floor vote last year in the Senate. It could very well get a floor vote in both houses this year. And it is a tax, and make no mistake about it. And as Ken referred to the Toronto York study, in 2021, they estimated that it would be an $803 million cost to implement. That has been updated, and the new price tag is $1.3 billion. $730 per household per year tax on your grocery bill. I'll point out, for those of you paying attention, that's twice the governor's gimmicky rebate checks that were just approved by the legislature. Okay, so double that rebate check. That's how much New Yorkers' grocery bills are going to go up. As the leader pointed out, as you shrink the packaging down and you pull away from technologies that have been proven to work over and over again, the shelf life will go down, the packaging size goes down, and when you talk about transportation, volume is where the cost is. If you can't move it efficiently in bulk, then it's going to be more expensive. That's where these costs are coming from. How did we get here? As Ken pointed out, 7 other states, about 30 states have some sort of packaging program in place. Right? But 7 have done something along these lines. But in true New York fashion, and I can give you a laundry list of things where if we couldn't be first, we were hell-bent to be worst. And that is the attitude my colleagues down on the other side of the aisle have. We weren't first on this, but you know what? We're going to do it bigger. We're going to do it better. We're not going to listen to the lessons learned. We're going to reinvent the wheel, and it's going to have 4 sides. That's what we're doing here. $700 a year on your grocery bills, twice the governor's gimmicky rebate checks. It's outrageous. And they're not listening to the science. For the party that likes to lecture everybody about the science, as an engineer myself, my first job when I got out of the Navy was in a packaging manufacturing plant. You got to follow the science, and what you're going to have is you're going to have much more expensive transportation because the unit costs aren't going to be there because you're going to be shipping them in smaller things. They're not going to last as long, so we're going to have more waste. We're going to have more spoilage. That's where the money's coming from. That's where $1.3 billion, and instead of following the leads of some of the other progressive and liberal states that have said, whoa, you know what, we headed down this path and this isn't what we want to pay for, let's knock it off. Nope, New York is going to head full on to that wall, and we're going to break through that wall no matter what. It's foolish, but and if it was foolish and that was it, you know, we could chuckle about it, but at the end of the day, this is going to hit the wallets of every New York family. And as the leader pointed out, it's really easy if you live on the upper side of Manhattan to say, well, what's a couple $100 more? In my district, the people that I represent, the 6 counties, very rural New York in the North Country, where I got a lot of very rural people living in cost is a challenge if we can get the services in northern New York. The cost of this is going to be backbreaking to a lot of families in my district, and I know a lot of the districts, both sides of the aisle. I just wish that the Democrats would come to the realization that this is a bridge way too far, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've got other states that have managed to figure this out, and it's workable. But nope, we've got to, if we didn't think of it, we've got to do it our own way, and we're going to mess this up. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the headliner here, she speaks far more eloquently than I do on this, Senator Pam Helm.
That's true.
Thank you, everyone. I don't know about that, Senator Steck, but I guess speaking fourth, after 3 great speakers, what I'll do is I'd like to just kind of set the stage for the EPR, right? For this conference, what we're thinking about when we see bills like this. First of all, as the leader said, we know right off the bat, we live in one of the most unaffordable states in this nation, one of the highest tax states in this nation, and one of the most regulated states in the nation, and honestly, one of the least business-friendly states in the nation. Every single poll that comes out, I think Sienna just came out with another one, no surprise, it shows what people are asking for is they want lawmakers to take action to reduce the cost of living here in New York State. We all love living here. It's a beautiful state, but it's too darn expensive. And as the leader said, we hear the Democrats from the governor on down talking all the time about affordability. But they say one thing and they do the exact opposite. And this bill, I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned is this bill grows the size of our state government. It adds more layers of bureaucracy. It threatens jobs, increases consumer costs, including food costs. And I just wanted to point out, I think if we just all pause for a moment and think about bringing the food from our local farms to our kitchen tables. Every single part of growing or producing food on our local farms, packaging foods at our local manufacturers, trucking that food to our local grocery stores, and even refrigerating the food in those stores has been impacted by costly state mandates. Look at, since the Democrats took over one-party rule in the state in 2019, these climate mandates, the unnecessary mandates, they've gone too far, too fast, and they've affected the cost of just about everything. And the EPR bill, as you already heard, is just going to continue building on that. I have to say, this is my 9th year in the state Senate. I have never received so many letters of opposition from such a diverse group as I have on this Harcum EPR bill. Business is opposed, labor is opposed. But I want to make a key point here. They're all opposed, but they're also saying we have a workable alternative, workable solutions in the Martinez bill. It's something that the Democrats, I don't know why they're pushing this Harcum bill. They have other alternatives. Just real quick, my district in the Finger Lakes region, in the greater Rochester area that I represent, there's more than 250 food and beverage manufacturers and suppliers. That's more than 10,000 people in my region alone who are employed by these companies. And these are everyday companies, people, names you'll recognize from the shelf. Kraft Heinz, Barilla, Baldwin Richardson Foods, Mott's, Seneca Foods, Dr. Pepper, and packaging companies like Evergreen Pactiv. This bill, it fails to recognize the incredible work that all of these leading companies have done to date to improve recycling and to reduce plastics going into our landfills. Coca-Cola Fairlife is making a historic investment as we speak right now in Monroe County. Chobani is making a huge investment in Central New York. So just take a moment and think about all of the state resources, the taxpayer money that's been expended by New York State to secure these investments. And then ask yourself, why in the world are state Democrats considering pushing through this EPR legislation that puts these taxpayer dollars, investments, and jobs at risk? I just want to mention the National Supermarket Association, who represents hundreds of independent grocery stores, believes that this bill is going to disproportionately impact lower-income families. They're saying that a lot of the products that are eligible under SNAP benefits will disappear from the shelves. Now, again, I had to say that no one here is opposed to taking additional steps to protect the environment, to expand recycling opportunities, and to reduce waste. But this bill is too extreme. And as you already heard, it's more extreme not only than other bills in our nation, but worldwide. You heard how in California, the governor determined that the cost of their EPR, their plastic regulations, it was just too high for consumers and businesses, and he nixed it. So what have we learned here in New York State? And my call to duty here is that we don't make the same mistake as other states. And I urge the Senate and the Assembly Democrats to oppose this legislation, to look at the Martinez legislation as a better place to start, more workable proposal. But we have got to stop this. People in the state are expecting us to make things more affordable, not less. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
I mean, you can't really sum it up better than that. I want to thank all the speakers who I thought all added exceptionally prescient points as to why this legislation is problematic, why it is likely unworkable, and why it is absolutely harmful to New Yorkers, whether it's business, whether it's a family who's trying to put food on the table, this is going to make things more expensive. And that's also, imagine if you work at Constellation Brands or Novalex, not only is your bill going to go up, but you might lose your job as an added bonus. And so I just think, as Senator Helming said, there are other ways. The Democrats always like to present a binary, it's this or the planet. That's a false choice. That's a false choice that somehow the planet, if we don't do EPR, is going to end. It's not true. And there's other ways to increase products that go into the recycling chain. As Ken mentioned, Minnesota, Maryland are two examples that most, even businesses will say, this is workable. We can work with this. But again, we can't do that because it's not sexy enough for New York to copy Maryland or to copy Minnesota. We have to somehow push the envelope. And no doubt, in my view, this is political in nature. The far left environmental advocates, they always say New York's too big to go halfway. Go all the way, and that will push then the dialogue nationally, politically, on this kind of issue. That's what this is about. So this isn't about New Yorkers. This is about some larger, extreme, leftist political goal. Because you heard even Ken say that 2 years, and then you see that over and over again with all these bills around the CLCPA. The goals, it isn't the goal itself that's bad. It's the timeline that's unworkable. Every time, 2 years, 1 year, 5, depending on what it is, it's always some remarkably short, unreachable timeline. And ask yourself, if it's unreachable, how does that advance the goal? It doesn't, unless the goal is something else. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions. If you have a question for me, if you have a question for Ken, direct it to him or any of my members who talked today. Yep.
Here said that they believe there was a projected cost savings of 1.3 billion statewide. Again, that's their projection.
Sure.
I'm not saying that it is.
Sure.
And then that includes 50 million for Western New York, among other savings. And they're saying that is in part for the amount of money that would be saved from private hauling and other costs. What do you say to that?
So here's what I take. I take a sort of objection to the savings is all on municipalities, right? It's going to save the city of Buffalo. It's going to save the county of Erie, right? Now, if Mark Poloncarz will pass that savings along to the taxpayer, then I'll be stunned, and that'd be great. But he won't. He won't, and it will. And I don't care who it is. In fairness, Bob, those savings never get passed back to the taxpayer. They'll get used or reappropriated for some other municipal or local expense, whether it's police, roads, some other thing. It will never end up back in New Yorkers' pockets. So when I hear that, I sort of take issue that the savings is never realized. It may exist on paper, and it may be real to you use that number. But when you look at some of the budgets that some localities have, that number starts to look a lot less gaudy. And again, what we're talking about is the savings is going to be, let's say, the city of North Tonawanda saves money on recycling or whatever it might be. And I guarantee you that 4 years from now, the taxes people pay in North Tonawanda are the same or higher than they are today. Then this is going to add to their grocery bill. So it's not a savings for the person who actually lives and works and reads the newspaper and lives in New York. It's a savings that exists that people, insiders and think tanks use. They use this number all the time, these numbers. Oh, it's going to be a huge savings. And yet, nothing ever gets cheaper here in New York. Nothing ever goes down. No one's taxes go down. They say, well, thank God we did EPR. We can cut your taxes. That'll never happen. That'll never, ever happen. And so that's what I would say. I'm not saying that they're not telling the truth, but it's misleading to me because that savings will never be realized by actual New Yorkers.
Can I add that, Senator?
Yeah, please.
So what they did in that report is said, we're passing a mandate that companies reduce their packaging use by 30%. And if that were achievable, which we think it's not, and you say there's going to be 30% less material disposed of in 12 years than today, and it costs X dollars per ton to dispose of it, that's where they came up with their savings. So it's based on what we think is an unachievable mandate, that goes beyond what any other state is asking for. They also don't consider that as companies respond to this, they're going to have to reformulate some of their packaging materials. They may have to retool some of their equipment to use different materials and box and package things differently. None of those costs were considered in this. And those costs, as the senators have talked about, are all going to flow down to consumers. So it's one of my colleagues equated to the Beyond Plastics report as someone who found that their homework was due tomorrow and put a lot of graphs in a document that didn't say a whole lot. But that's about all it said. If we achieve this unachievable number, we're going to save money. And yes, there's nothing in the bill that says if municipalities see these reductions in their tipping costs, that they have to pass them on to consumers or in reduce taxes. That's not in the bill.
Stunningly.
And to build on what has just been said, now, most of our producers do not reside in New York State for a variety of reasons. In the last 5-6 years, New York State has added to those reasons. So one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to change their packaging to sell to New York, or they're not going to sell in New York anymore. Let's say that they change their packaging to sell to New York. Well, the York study says that it's going to cost New Yorkers $1.3 billion, and it's going to cost New York families $730-something a year. But if companies that live in the Midwest or in the South, if they all change all of a sudden, and if the advocates desire that, hey, we're going to use New York because it's a large market, to leverage that nationally, well, we're 19 million people. The country's 300+ million people. So that national number grows from $1 billion to, it's 20 times as much, right? So you're looking at, tens of billions of dollars nationally if this is implied, because we're going back to shelf lives will be down, packaging sizes will be down. So now a national system that's based on moving goods from coast to coast, you're going to have very real spoilage concerns. And so we're going to see a less efficient food program nationally. Again, if they can get this leverage in New York State to move the needle nationally, which I think is their goal.
I just have to add to that, too. And as the leader said, originally was jobs are going to be down, right? So when I talk to my town supervisors, a lot of them follow the recommendations of the New York State Association of Counties. I explained to them, look, have you factored in the cost of potentially losing your largest employer in this town? And even if you don't lose them, if they have cutbacks, how much do they contribute to your town in so many other ways? They contribute, to boys and girls, sporting, to our education, to so much. All of that is at risk under EPR. Again, this is just one more straw that's going to break the camel's back, right? Because we keep piling these mandates on top of these businesses.
Next question on topic. Johan, NBC 13.
Senator Helmy, I was wondering if you could talk about that Martinez bill that you brought up as an example. Like, what are some of the differences and what are some of the things that you support?
Right. I would say my understanding of the Martinez bill, it's more in line with some of the other states that actually have workable plans in place to reduce plastics, to create market opportunities for some of these materials, to keep them out of the landfills. The businesses who have sent us letters of opposition to the HARCM have also suggested that the Martinez bill, I think one of the things they like too is that under the Martinez model, there's more of an opportunity to bring together the environmentalists, the business partners, to bring in chemists, to bring in people who know more about all these subject areas. We keep talking about the cost impacts to food and everyday people, working class people, right? But there's so much more in that bill that we don't talk about, the toxicology and so much else. We need experts at the table to get this figured out and to do it right, to learn from all those other states' mistakes.
So I'll add to that. All these states have passed EPR laws, have said we're also going to do a needs assessment to understand what the current state of affairs is in our waste management, also the capacity to reuse materials that we divert from disposal. And the first couple states that passed the law requiring a needs assessment also included in the law what the requirements were, what the recycling targets were, what the reuse targets were. So what's the point of the study? The last couple of states that passed it said, we're going to do a needs assessment, understand the state of play in our state, this is Minnesota, Washington State, Maryland, and once that study's done, we're going to tell the producers, you come together and tell us based on the needs assessment what needs to be done. Their plan gets submitted to the state agency, their version of DEC. They're responsible for reviewing it and approving it after public comment. So it's a very different process rather than picking numbers out of the air and say, well, we'll just reduce packaging by 50% in 12 years, which is what the original Harcum-Glick bill said. So that's a major, major difference. There's others as well, but that's a huge one.